Welcome to the Modern Husbands podcast, where Dr. Ross, Christian, and Brian host national experts who share ideas to manage money and the home as teammates. June is Men's Health Month, encouraging boys and men to take charge of their overall health by implementing healthy living decisions. The state of men's mental health in America is dire, and we aim to do our part to do something about it. For today's show, we welcome Justin Birckbichler, a men's health advocate, testicular cancer survivor, and the founder of aballsysenseofhumor.com. And we promise to have a few laughs along the way in today's show. Justin will share how he got through cancer during a turbulent marriage, focusing on his mental well-being and managing his physical health in the ways he could. Justin and his blog have won numerous advocacy and awareness awards and was recognized by Healthline as one of the best men's health blogs for 2020. Enjoy the show. Justin, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm ready to get this ball rolling.
Oh, you're off to a great start.
I always like to open with a pun.
I think I was a little slower on that pun.
You went straight to it.
Yeah.
Can you walk us through what your life was like before you had discovered that you had cancer?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was 25 years old at the time. It was the fall of 2016 is when all my diagnosis really came to a head here. And at the time, I thought I was living my best life. I had recently bought a house. I had changed from teaching fourth grade in one school to a little bit more of an affluent school district. I was, as far as I could tell, I was healthy. Everything was going really well in my life. I've, found out that things were not quite going on well, physically, but then as I went through this process, I realized that I really wasn't living my best life in any capacity. I was kind of living through a prototypical checklist life. Like I wanted to do this without really thinking like, is that what I really want to do? But at the time I thought I was having the greatest experience of my life, but things changed rather quickly in October of 2016.
So from your perspective, things were going really well, and then you got this diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
So can you tell us a little bit about how, I guess, you initially managed this diagnosis?
Yeah. So I didn't do a great job from the emotional side. I kind of went into battle mode. I wanted to do whatever I could. I remember when I had found my lump through a self-exam, and I went to a couple doctors. And then when the urologist finally told me that I was most likely cancer, I just remember feeling so numb and just being like, okay, well, what I literally said to him was, I'll get back to you on that one, which is not really something you're supposed to say when you're told you're diagnosed with cancer. So I was, I left his office. He wanted to schedule my surgery like immediately because testicular cancer can be very aggressive. And I told him I wasn't ready to commit to a surgery. I called him back later that evening and said we would do the surgery. So I went from, having an area of concern to having a surgery scheduled in less than a week. So they did the surgery and they did scans and found that had spread to some of my lymph nodes. So I was going to need chemo. So chemo was going to start a month after surgery. So within 6 weeks, I went from what I could tell was perfectly healthy to you're a cancer patient now. And so I really I compartmentalized a lot. It was a lot of this is what I need to do. This is what I'm going to do. And we're just going to get through each day. So initially I didn't, again, like prior to cancer, I thought I was managing fine. I was, told I had to do chemo every day for 9 weeks or something like that. And I was like, all right, well, guess I'm going to have to be watching a lot of Netflix for the next 9 weeks. And it was really just a lot of, doing what I was told and not thinking about it too much.
How did you stay focused on your own physical and mental well-being during that time?
Yeah, so the physical well-being, that was my main focal point while I was going through cancer and chemo. I really did whatever was best for my body at that time. There would be times where I would sleep for, I'd sleep overnight, go to chemo, come back, go to sleep for the afternoon, wake up, try to eat a little bit of dinner, which was normally Chick-fil-A or pizza. So like I didn't eat the healthiest, but it was really whatever could sit with me. While my mental well-being, as I've kind of alluded to, I didn't do a great job of prioritizing that during cancer. It was well after cancer is when I started realizing the mental health ramifications of going through cancer, and really that I spent such a long time fighting to save my life. Now I needed to spend a lot of time fighting to save my mental health side of things. So, I always said, as my physical health was getting better, once I finished chemo and everything was clear and I was in remission, my body started rebuilding itself. My hair came back. I started having more energy. My mental health was taking a nosedive. So I eventually started seeing a therapist. I went on medication. I did meditation. I did all sorts of different things to really then prioritize my mental health. And that's something I still continue to do during this day. It's been coming up on about 5.5 years since diagnosis, and my life has completely changed since then. And I would say every change that has changed since then has been a positive change. And like how I said that I thought in 2016 I was living my best life. Now in 2023, I really am living my best life. And a lot of that came from prioritizing my mental health and making sure that I was doing things that were good for me, that brought me joy, brought me happiness, and really brought me meaning versus just trying to go through a checklist of type of thing. So it was, I wish I could give you the answer. I took care of my physical health by working out and eating healthy, but I just told you I slept and I ate junk food a lot. And then I also told you I didn't prioritize my mental health, but I eventually, once I got through everything, I realized the importance of, again, taking care of your physical health, and not eating Chick-fil-A for every meal, because not only is that healthy, it's super expensive to eat at Chick-fil-A nowadays too. Like,
yes, it is.
I'll bring Chick-fil-A to my son at lunch at the school, and it's like $20 for the two of us, and I'm like, how did that happen?
Yeah, it's like $9 for a regular meal now.
I know,
it's crazy.
It's so good though.
My son spent 17 by himself the last time we were there. Yeah. I just have a quick question, Justin, because you brought up that you did see a psychiatrist and a psychologist, and I'm glad you did, because unfortunately men who commit suicide at 4 times the rate as women, they struggle with the idea of going to find help. Now they'll go to a doctor if they're physically injured. They'll go to the gym to make themselves more physically fit, but there's some sort of taboo around your mental well-being, which is dangerous. Was there something that like triggered it where you realized, I really need to get some, professional assistance to work through this?
Yeah, absolutely. It was I'll remember this till my last day on earth. That it was, I noticed that I was starting to slip into some depressive tendencies. And, when I was in high school, I had a lot of suicide ideation and self-harm and stuff. And I started recognizing those same signs. Again, because of like the stigma, like you mentioned, I didn't want to admit that to anyone, most of all myself. But then I started having a little bit of a thinking. I was like, I just spent 9 weeks fighting for my life to stay alive. I don't want to just be alive. I want to live. So when I got to my doctor for my 12-year follow-up, or not 12-year follow-up, I'm not quite there, 12-month follow-up, he asked me how I was doing, and I said the typical thing American men say when somebody asks you how you're doing, you say, I'm doing fine. Yeah. And he said, no, how are you really doing? So I really opened up to him, and I said, I'm actually not doing fine at all. So I give a lot of credit. I obviously give credit to my oncologist for saving my physical life, but also for saving my emotional life, because he took the time to make sure that I was actually doing fine, not just saying I was doing fine. So I think like the best thing that I can say there is be willing to admit it to yourself. And then also if somebody asks you how you're actually doing, and as long as it's not, just in conversation, like, how are you doing? If they're asking how you're really doing, be open and be vulnerable. I think that's that takes a lot more strength than to just hold it inside. And like you mentioned, unfortunately, men do commit suicide at a far greater rate than our female counterparts. A lot of it is because we want to be so strong and we want to be tough and we don't want to have other people worry to us. Well, if you're not taking care of yourself, you're not going to be there to take care of other people. And it's if you had a broken leg, you wouldn't just say, I'm going to grin and bear it. And you would go to the hospital and you'd get a cast.
Right. Yeah.
So if you have some issues with your mental health, it's the same thing. Your brain is just part of your body, just like any other part of your body.
Mm-hmm. Just another muscle.
Exactly.
Justin, I mean, your journey, both, I mean, physically but emotionally is just inspirational, right? And I want to kind of break this next question and maybe into two parts a little bit. And so we've been talking about your journey, especially on the emotional side and the physical side. As a therapist, as a doctor, I'm a little bit more interested in the emotional side of things. But what tips do you have for our listeners? We always like to have tips for our listeners. How can they improve their own emotional well-being? One, if they get a cancer diagnosis like you did. So you said in your own story, you didn't react the right way to begin with. So if they first get this type of diagnosis, how should they react? What tips would you have, from your own process? And then just in general, because I mean, you've had the significant journey about learning about living your best life. What general tips then for improving our own emotional well-being do you have for our listeners?
Absolutely. So I'll answer that in the two different parts.
Yeah.
The first and foremost, if you're diagnosed with cancer, you are going to go through mental health things. I don't care what you say, you are going to. So find help immediately from that first method of diagnosis, and help. They do have therapists that do specialize in people who are going through cancer. And with, I think one of the greatest things that came out of the COVID pandemic was the wider availability of telehealth. So you're no longer isolated to whatever therapist are you're in the area. You can see a therapist in a different country I don't know how insurance works, so maybe you couldn't, but you can see a therapist
anywhere in the country,
anywhere within probably the lower 48. I don't know if you can do it in Australia, or not Australia,
Alaska or Hawaii.
Alaska. That's what I was trying to say. But yeah, find help immediately. And even when you don't think you need help, or even when things are going good, still keep those appointments. When I was seeing, there have been times where I had a therapy appointment and I was like, I don't have anything like wrong to talk about. So we just talk and celebrate successes, and it was great. And also find something that works for you, like as a personal outlet. For me, it was writing a lot. Just writing down my feelings. I found by getting them out of my head and into a Google Doc, really, it wasn't really paper. That helped me a lot. So find really what works for you. And also, especially if you're a guy going through cancer, find other guys who are going through cancer, because guys go through cancer differently than females. I've been one of my good friends, Trevor Maxwell. He was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer a couple of years after my diagnosis. And he ended up starting a Facebook group called The Howling Place as part of his Man Up to Cancer initiative, where it's right now we're like 2,000 men strong of guys going through cancer, and we just connect. Awesome. And there's a lot of people that I haven't ever met face to face, but I know them well enough that I'll just check in and be like, hey, how are you doing? And really holding that space for them. So that's those are the biggest things when you are diagnosed with cancer. Get help for your mental health immediately. It's you don't want to wait until it's too late. And then a lot of that kind of same stuff is what I'd say to just the general guys going through things. It's a shame how, let me figure out how to phrase this. So men often have better access to care because for whatever reason, this is kind of anecdotal, but it's also kind of supported by research. Men have better access to care. They're taken more seriously by doctors. However, they don't go to the doctor. So we have this weird dichotomy where we can get the highest level of care, but we're choosing not to do it. So finding mental health professionals, and again, it's a lot easier nowadays to find a mental health professional who specializes in treating men. Just opening up and talking to your friends, it is a lifesaver. And I know, I've shared about my cancer story for years. But when I started sharing about my mental health, that's where more people were like, you're so brave, or you're so strong for sharing these things. And I don't always like those words associated with going through something. I'm just trying to be real. And I think that is the final advice, is just be open and honest with everybody, because the only way we're going to break this stigma is if we're all working together to break this stigma. And if you have a one-on-one conversation with somebody about mental health things, that's going to let them know, hey, it's okay. And it's going to have a ripple effect out there. And when you speak up about it publicly, that, that's how you make a tsunami, I think. I'm also not great with meteorology, so maybe that's not happening.
We've learned that Australia is not part of the lower 48.
That's the takeaway you got, Christian.
Absolutely. I mean, technically speaking, that's not wrong. Australia is not part of the lower 48.
You are correct there. And I do know some actually really good therapists in Australia, actually. So that there probably is some possibility there, though they probably don't take insurance. You're right.
Well, I will actually share a cool story about Australia. This was a couple years ago. There was some research institute in Australia that was running a global study about a very specific testicular cancer mental health support.
Oh, yeah, I know this story. Yeah, go ahead. It's a great story.
Yeah. So I was, appeared to be part of the pilot program, and I participated in it. And each day you had to check in how you were feeling. And so there were a couple of days that, I say a couple of days, it's probably closer to like 2 weeks. 2 weeks that I was just saying, I was feeling like a 1 out of 10, a 2 out of 10, blah, 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 blah. And so after about 2 weeks of checking in, the lead researcher, who was based in Australia, reached out to me personally to ask how I was doing and see, what he could do to personally support. And while he was clearly not part of the lower 48 because he was in Australia, he reached out from forever. And that's one thing that always sticks with me, is just by being honest with what I thought was just like an automated app, somebody was actually checking in on me, and that you can't underestimate the importance of that.
That's really cool.
That is like the best vision of what modern husbands can be as a community.
Right.
Genuine connections and offers of support, offers of a listening ear. Justin for president. I don't know how old you are, Justin, but
I'm not old enough to be president, I don't think yet. I don't know. I don't even know what states are in this country, so probably shouldn't be. I'll be president of Australia. It's fine.
Yeah.
So we like to end our podcast with just one takeaway. What is something that you want our listeners to walk away with that is simple enough for them to take action? What would that be?
Yeah, I think do what is best for you. And I think that sums it up pretty nicely. Do what's best for your health, do what's best for your mental health, do what brings you happiness, because we have one life on this earth, and you want to make the best of it. And that's really what I think has been so important in my life over the past couple of years, is doing things that bring me joy and just make me happy to be alive.
Justin, thanks for joining us today. You're an inspiration.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks, Justin.
Thanks for joining us today. Don't forget to click subscribe wherever you download your podcasts, and share the Modern Husbands podcast with your friends. A special thanks to our guest, and of course to all of our listeners. Please be on the lookout for new and exciting announcements on modernhusbands.com. Until next time, be well.